Hello and welcome to the 39th annual NOFA Vermont Winter Conference and the kickoff to our year-long celebration of our 50th birthday. We're so excited that you're here for this different, but hopefully still engaging, community building, and inspiring month full of learning, connecting, and visioning the food and farming system for our shared future. Some of you were with us last Sunday at our first keynote event with Sherry Mitchell, who spoke really beautifully on the power of collaboration and connection, connecting to place and to other people to get through these trying times. If you weren't able to attend last week, I highly recommend you check out the recording of her talk. It was really wonderful, and that will be sent out. All registrants should have received access to the recordings for last week's workshops and Sherry's keynote in your weekly conference email. We'd love it if you took a moment to introduce yourself if you'd like to. In the chat box, you can select all panelists and attendees and put your name, your farm name, if you're a farmer, where you're calling in from. We're so glad that you're here with us. I'm just going to see that folks are able to do that. So just let us know if you're able to get over to the chat box, and some folks are maybe not on their computer, but we'd love to hear from you if you're willing to chat. Someone's coming in from Northfield, Vermont. Hi, Carol. Thanks, y'all. Nice. Jericho, Moncton, Ripton, another Jericho, East Montpelier, Waterbury. Awesome. So nice to see you all coming in. Thanks. We're so glad that you're here with us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our conference coordinator, the wonderful Livy Bolger. She's at Livy, Livy, at NOFA-VT.org. She can help you get set up. My name's Grace Odell. I'm the executive director of NOFA Vermont. Over my last year and a half in this role, I've had the great pleasure to connect with many of you in person. For those of you I haven't met yet or who are just joining in from afar the first time to our conference this year, I'd really love to connect. So please say hi in the chat and we'll find a time to get together in person when COVID permits, hopefully soon. If you're new to the conference, welcome. We are so glad to have you with us. And we'd love it, again, if everyone or anyone who's comfortable using the chat wants to drop in how many years you've been coming to the conference. It's really sweet to see how many years folks have been. 12 years. Wow, it's awesome. Someone's calling in from Michigan. So good to have you. Welcome. So I wanted to share a little bit for those of you who may be new to NOFA and tell you about who we are. So NOFA Vermont is a membership organization founded in 1971. We'll be hearing more about the early days of this organization and how it got to be where it is and the movement broader than just the organization. But our members have always been our heart. You all help us build an agricultural movement that centers people and land and is just. Thank you for being a part of our community. We so appreciate your support of our work to build a Vermont ag system that benefits all living things. If you're not a member, please consider joining this wonderful crew with us today to strengthen our voice and support our shared work. Given that this conference is largely themed on place, land, and agriculture, we want to begin our time together with an acknowledgement of our place in a colonial land history of the state of Vermont. We, the organizers of the NOFA conference, acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Elnu tribe of the Abenaki, Nulhegan Band of the Cusuk Abenaki Nation of Missisquoi, and the Cusuk traditional band of the Cus Abenaki Nation, on which we're learning, working, and organizing here today. This land is known by its original and current inhabitants as Nadakina, the Dawn Land. These borders that are created by non-native governments associated with Vermont, Canada, and the United States are colonial divisions. And we acknowledge the laws that allow the original peoples and the recognized tribes in the colonial state of Vermont to pursue their culture does not ensure full tribal access, even in their own homeland. We think it's important to make this land acknowledgement because NOFA's mission invites us all to consider how we relate to, steward, and live on the land we know as Vermont, to promote an economically viable, ecologically sound, and just food system for current and future generations. In honor and respect, we invite people gathering at this conference to deepen all of our shared understanding of the ongoing process of colonization and its continuous impact on this place and on us. We ask that each of us commit ourselves to sort of dismantling, decolonizing these ways of thinking, behaving, relating to the land, and the design of legal structures so that we can repair relationships with our Native communities and the land and support reconciliation efforts among all peoples and ensure the inclusion of the Abenaki Nation. I'd like to share some concrete ways beyond this acknowledgement that you can learn from Indigenous leaders throughout the conference. So last week we learned from Sherry Mitchell, who's a Native American land activist and lawyer who raised in the Penobscot Indian Reservation. You can access the recording of that talk if you missed it through the weekly links. And on the 17th, you can learn about the Abenaki Land Link project that will be featured in the Community Food Access panel on the 17th. All conference attendees will have the opportunity all month to stream the film Gather, a fight to revitalize our Native food ways from home all month long. Tune in for a question and answer discussion with the filmmaker and a panel of activists, chefs, and scientists who were featured in the film on Monday, February 22nd from 6:30 to 8. And there are several workshops and roundtables that are aimed at helping us all develop a better understanding of how race, class, power, privilege are all at play in agriculture right here in Vermont. We hope that this conference offers a moment to engage meaningfully in deep thinking about our role in these structures and how we can move towards a more just world. This month, please consider attending workshops and roundtables that including advancing BIPOC land access in Nadakina, which is led by leaders from the NEFOC, Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, the Everytown Project, Vermont Land Trust, Vital Communities in NOFA, Vermont. The Cows Don't Milk Themselves, which is about milk with dignity and farm worker rights in the time of COVID. Participatory, that's led by migrant justice leaders. Participatory capacity building for an inclusive organic movement led by Ade Briones of First Nations Development Institute and Jennifer Taylor of the Organic Farming Association, who runs Lola's Organic Farm. And finally, community food access, which is about growing for each other, led by leaders from all over our state. We see these as crucial moments of opportunity to together understand this place we all call home. Finally, this conference would really not be possible without the support of our sponsors. These folks are listed on our website, and we invite you to check their profiles out and send them some love. This event is our biggest fundraiser of the year, and sponsors help make it successful even through this very wonky COVID time. We want to especially thank the following cultivator, nourisher, and nurturer sponsors: Meadows Bee Farm, The Alchemist, City Market, Johnson Family Foundation, Lintillac Foundation, Forrest C. and Francis H. Latner Foundation, King Arthur Baking Company, Lawson's Finest Liquids, Stonyfield, Vermont Family Farms, and our media sponsor, 7 Days. Thank you. In addition to the sponsors, I want to thank the other contributors who helped to make this conference possible. For sure, the NOFA Vermont board and staff, also the volunteers who worked behind the scenes, presenters this year coming in from all over the country, and all of you for participating and being a part. It would not be possible without all of you. Thank you so much. One of those amazing volunteers and collaborators is the facilitator for the next panel, who will be facilitating this elder and collective wisdom from our community's longtime leaders. Will has put in an enormous amount of time and energy, bringing the group together, really thinking deeply about what the stories are that want to come out about lessons learned and how this movement got going. And we're just so deeply grateful to you, Will. Will has stood as a longtime leader in the Vermont organic community. Many of you probably know Will. He co-owns and operates Golden Russet Farm in Shoreham. He has also served Vermont's organic community over the years as a NOFA board member twice, as a Vermont Organic Farmers president, as a member of the Vermont House of Representatives Ag and Forest Products Committee. He shared that he feels lucky and grateful to have been involved with many of the panelists as Vermont's organic community has evolved over the last 4+ decades into what it is today. After nearly 40 years of commercial organic veggie production, he and his wife Judy are in the process of transitioning the farm to their daughter Pauline. Super exciting. It is my great pleasure to get to introduce Will, who will in turn be introducing the rest of this amazing and very inspiring panel of folks. I wanted to just share a logistical detail that if you have questions for the panelists that come up as they're discussing together, please put them in the Q&A box. So there's the chat box where you've been putting, where you're calling in from. Then there's a box that says Q&A. If you drop your questions in there, we will ask the panelists, we'll pass them to Will, and we'll get to as many as we can in our time together. So thank you so much for being here. And without further ado, I'm excited to pass it over to Will Stevens. Will?
Hi, Grace. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to connect with a bunch of my good friends today. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Livy. Thank you, Kim, for your behind the scenes work on the control panel here and keeping things moving. That's great. Today, we have 6 people who, instead of being outstanding in their fields, are settling in and getting comfy in their Zoom rooms, willing, ready, and able to share years of experience and perspective on the evolution of the organic community here in Vermont. And it's quite a gift. The one thing I'm going to say right up top, and it's the only time I'm going to speak for the entire panel, is that I think many of us are not digital natives. So bear with us if and when situations arise that don't lend themselves towards a smooth flow. As I prepared for today, I added up all the years of experience our 6 panelists bring to the discussion, and the number is 250 years of involvement with Vermont's organic community. That's a whole lot of perspective, and my hope, as I said, is to draw out a few nuggets of wisdom drawn on all those years of experience. To set this up a little bit, I've been trying to think about, well, okay, so when many of us got started, what was going on? And a lot of baseball was played during the day, for one thing. There was no Zoom. There wasn't much for internet. Computers were often found in computer labs in schools. Party line probably was not so much a political thing as something people did with rotary phones. But most importantly, and germane to today, organics in those days was a movement. And it wasn't an industry, which it's become. And this was the time, and this is the environment where today's panelists got their start, found their passion in organic farming, and launched their career path. So, I'm happy to spend the next hour or so with all of you and all of them as we listen and learn from some of the earliest practitioners. And with that said, we'll get started with the introductions. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. And then after Suzanne will be the last. And after that, we'll jump into questions. So Grace Gershuny, why don't you kick it off?
Thanks, Will. I believe this was going in age order, right? Yeah. Sorry if I muted accidentally. So I am Grace Gershuny, and he pronounced it correctly, which is great. And I live in Barnet, Vermont, which is in Caledonia County in the Northeast Kingdom. And the Northeast Kingdom has been my home ever since I moved to Vermont in 1973, although I've lived in different parts of it. And so I really got interested in organic when I lived in Montreal, which was just before I moved to Vermont. And I grew up in the city and never had a garden. and began to get interested in organic food. Was working as a volunteer manager at the Montreal Natural Foods Co-op. And from there, I just knew that I had to become a grower, certainly if I wanted to be able to have good food. So eventually, I got to Vermont in 1973, had my first garden, about a half acre, and it was love it. It was all that I had ever wanted. And right up the road from me lived Robert Hurrier, who was a founder of NOFA. And he came to me one day in 1974 after seeing my impressive first garden and said, "How would you like to organize a farmer's market?" So that's what got me started in NOFA and the organic movement. And there were many, many subsequent paths along the road. And I ended up volunteering to help draft NOFA's first certification program in 1977. And that became what I called the gum that was stuck to the bottom of my shoe for many years, and eventually led to many adventures as I got involved with national level organizing and represented NOFA and various endeavors such as the development of the what is now the Organic Trade Association, which a lot of people consider to be the devil incarnate, but it was part and parcel of the first national level organizing towards national level certification, and eventually led to my being recruited to come to Washington, D.C. after the passage of the Organic Foods Production Act of 1990 to help write the regulations. And I don't think I can do justice to that experience, but I should mention that I was working for NOFA in various capacities, starting as a volunteer, starting in 1977 with the certification program, eventually became the first full-time state coordinator in Vermont in 1979. And after the money ran out, I did some other work as a contractor for NOFA, including conference organizing. I helped organize the very first winter conference. And in 1983, I was the program director and administrative director for the NOFA summer conference, and that was held at Johnson State College, which was one of the high points of my life. Along the way, I went to graduate school and got a master's in extension education because I wanted to be a consultant. I wanted to be a farm consultant. And I was helping actually work, try to develop a consulting service through NOFA, which didn't really go anywhere. We didn't get any funding. We got a lot of people interested in getting help and very few people who had any resources to support the project. In graduate school, I worked with the extension office on a work study project that turned into a booklet, and then was given over to me to publish on my own with the help of my colleague Joe Smiley, and that was the Soul of Soil, which really is which is still in print from Chelsea Green. And I that's really an explanation of what my passion was. That my passion was understanding the soil and understanding the connection to the food system and health. So fast forward, after 5 years on the USDA staff, and actually authoring most of certainly the crop standards that are still used today and that most people don't have any issues with. But the experience was very, very educational, to say the least. And rather than trying to tell you any more about my life since then, I will just refer you to the book that I most recently wrote called Organic Revolutionary, a memoir of the movement for real food, planetary healing, and human liberation. This is the third edition. The first two were self-published. This one was published just about a year ago by Black Rose Books in Montreal. And I will put the website in the chat, and I will also make an offer that anybody who wants a copy with an inscription from me can contact me directly, and that is being offered just at the NOFA price of $20, including shipping. And so today I'm still involved, and I'm still going to NOFA conferences, and I'm still excited about the possibility of organic to save the world. And that's why I keep getting out and yakking about it all over the place. And my latest endeavor is working with the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition. And we have been we just had the first of a series of 6 sessions on soil health and community resilience, stories from the North, based on people from the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont and the North Country of New Hampshire, sharing their stories and their wisdom. And I will put the link to that for registration for the next 5 coming up in the chat as well. So that's my story, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you, Grace. Sam and Eugenie, I think you're up next.
Okay, thanks, Will. Thank you, Grace. So we, just by way of a brief introduction, this is Sam Burr, my husband, I'm Eugenie Doyle, and we farm the Last Resort Farm in Moncton, Vermont. We have been at this farm since 1986, certified. We came here as dairy farmers, conventional dairy farmers, became certified organic in 1996, and are in the process. Our sort of next transition is to turn the farm over to our son, Silas Doyle Burr, and that transition is going pretty smoothly and is almost complete. I think the only other thing I want to say by way of introduction is to answer the question that everybody always asks us, which is, why are we called Last Resort Farm? And we started out, we met in 1979 after farming in different ways separately. Sam had some cows, and we got our own farm together in Brookfield in 1980. The farm was, I think you might say, sort of a dump. like there really was garbage in the gutters in the barn. The house and the barn had been separated. It was a very kind of an unloved place, but we were really happy to be there. So it was not a resort, and but it felt like the place where we wanted to end up. So we called it the last resort. And I mean, we have a lot of else to say. The farm we're at now is 285 acres, organic berries, vegetables, and hay. We no longer have the cows. That certainly is another story of transitions. I would say our whole farming story has been one of transitions, conventional dairy to conventional small fruit, being told you could not grow strawberries organically by my teachers at UVM, and then setting out to prove them wrong and to still be earning a living. So I'm sure we'll answer lots of other questions later, but we'll turn this over to the next panelist.
Great, thanks, Eugenie. Bruce, I think you're up. Be sure to unmute.
Thank you, Will. My first Zoom ever. Bruce Kaufman from Riverside Farm in East Hardwick, Vermont. I ran away to join this circus around 1974 and first started farming in New Hampshire, become very large conventional vegetable farms. Always knew as a kid I always wanted to be a vegetable farmer. Went to school at UNH for plant science and soil science, and basically had to leave the university system early because of my beliefs in organics. Involved at the University of New Hampshire with Seabrook and the anti-nuclear movement, and I needed a pro movement, and I've been basically a pro organic farmer since the early 70s. While I was at UNH taking regular soil science class, I had the opportunity to take a soil science class with Samuel Kamen, the founder of NOFA at Concord High School. Samuel and I got friends. After leaving college, I went to work for 2 years with Samuel and started the Rural Education Center, a farm school in Wilton, New Hampshire. Farm school never really made it very well, so we got ourselves some cows and we called ourselves Stonyfield Farm. Eventually, Stonyfield Farm made it into something. I left the dairy business in the late 70s to go into the vegetable business because that's what I always wanted to do. I farmed about 25 acres in New Hampshire with a NOFA board member back then, and helped start the Merrimack Growers Co-op. Moved to Vermont in 1987 to lots of different reasons, to Littlewood Farm in Plainfield with Joey Klein and Betsy Ziegler. And then in 1989, needed more farmland because the movement was getting to the point where we can actually support ourselves growing organic vegetables. And I bought Riverside Farm in 1989 with my partner Judy. And we've been here for the last 32 years growing up. We were doing 40 plus acres of vegetables, and now as we get closer to retirement, we're getting down to the 15 acres of vegetables. We started Deep Root Organic Growers Co-op, a co-op of about now with 26 farms throughout northern Vermont and southern Quebec that sell into the Boston and New England marketplace. When I first started farming, everything I grew went locally within 30 miles, but then as the whole movement changed, the marketplace changed, and we were able to sell into bigger stores and create a deep root in order to get our product out of Vermont. Now I'm back to selling about 85% of my product right here between Montpelier and Hardwick. And I just sell a few crops through deep root, but I still stay involved in deep root. That's what brought me into it. And I just still doing what I love, which is growing vegetables and taking care of the soil as best I can. Always learning more about it after 45 years of doing it.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. Dave Marchant, you're up next.
Hello, my name's David Marchant. Excuse me, but I'm going to actually read notes a bit here. Our farm's name is Riverberry Farm in Fairfax, Vermont, which we purchased in 1991. And like Eugenie and Sam, it was an old dairy farm that all the manure was left in the gutters when they sold the cows in '86 during the herd buyout. and had just kind of been left. How did I get started in organics? I was kind of a lost college student in the late 70s, and I took a course called the Urban Farm in Eugene, Oregon. It was one of the first kind of farm kind of idea, city farming back in the 70s. And I said, wow, this is what I want to do. So I worked there for a couple of years and then realized maybe I should study agriculture. So came back to my home state in New York and got a degree in agriculture from Cornell, and was interested in organics from the start. I remember going to one of the first NOFA summer conferences at UNH. That must have been like 1980 or 81, which was pretty amazing. It was like, wow. But as Eugenie said too, every professor always said, oh, you can't farm commercially organically. That's not possible. So I stuck with it. And then I was able to get a couple jobs learning, running market gardens, one in Plymouth, Vermont at the Farm and Wilderness Camps, and then the New Alchemy Institute in Falmouth, Mass, where I managed that market garden for a couple of years. And that's where I met my wife, Jane Sorensen. And then we started looking for land in Western Mass. And it kind of became difficult to find land in Massachusetts because the building boom was then. And it was also a very viable vegetable community. So land never came up for sale. So we kept looking for land kind of farther away. And then I got frustrated and I said, well, I might as well go to graduate school since I can't find any land, which was great because then I got to play at the research farm for a couple of years. And I discovered Hadley soils and river bottom land. I said, ooh, I guess I know what I want. And that was really a kind of really good thing to learn. So when we looked for land, we would always look for, river bottom land for vegetable production because we knew that's what we wanted to do. And, the realtors would take you and show you the bathrooms. We don't really care how many bathrooms the house has. We want to look at the land. And by coincidence, we got onto this place in Vermont. The ag commissioner's wife was the realtor. And she took us out to the land first. It was the first, I was like, whoa, this looks really nice. And then she took us into the house, which had been abandoned for a couple of years. And then she said, anyways, we were skeptical, but we said, this looks pretty good. And plus we had to finance it partially because Jane was a landscape architect. So we needed to have her have a job. So that's how we ended up at this place 30 years ago. It'll be 30 years, I guess it's just this year. So when we started, we had nothing here. It was just a derelict farm, cars. There must have been 30 junk cars. There was equipment sheds full with junk washing machines, but the soils were great. And we got started. And I thought when I moved up here, I said I was moving into the real boonies coming from Western Mass. But I knew about deep root organic truck farmers. While I was at UMass, I had convinced some of the professors to let us have a sustainable ag workshop series. And Paul Harlow came and spoke and a few others. And so I kind of had seen what Paul was doing down in down in southern Vermont. And so we decided let's go for it because we knew we could market through Deep Root, but that was the year Deep Root had crashed because I don't know if many of you know about the Alar scare back in like 88, which was the boom of the organic market. And then I think the year I joined, Will actually left because Deep Root was just about out of business. But it was a good thing for us. We were able to get going. Plus we grew organic strawberries. We didn't grow organic strawberries. First, we started with conventional because I had worked in strawberry IPM. And when you work in the conventional world, you kind of think it's impossible organically. So we started that, but the vegetables were certified organic. And at this point, I guess Will asked us to talk a little bit about how we market and whatnot. We are now growing about 50 acres of vegetables. And and we sell through the Deep Root Organic Truck Farmers Co-op, and we sell about a third of our crop goes to locally into the Burlington, Vermont area, which is city markets, healthy livings, and now all the food hubs. And then we have been able to develop a bit of a retail operation with bedding plants, and then pick your own strawberries, which are now certified organic after maybe about the last 15 years been able to be certified on those. And that's kind of how we market. Our main goal when we started, we wanted to see if we could be sustainable by being economically viable. Because all I ever heard was from people, oh, you can't farm organically and make a living. You can't make a living doing it. And so we kind of focused on that. And that's why we concentrated with Deep Root to start with. And then as markets slowly started to open up in the area, and there was some more interest locally, we were able to get into the farmers markets and things like that. And over time, we were able to do that. And we started, like I said, with my wife working 5 years. But the deal is that after 5 years, it had to be both of us full time, or else we were going to sell the farm. So we were able to do that, luckily. And now we've both been employed, I guess, for the last 25 years on the farm, full time. See now, other notes. Let me think. I guess that's primarily it. Will asked, where do we see it going, or what's our plans? We hope we can, what have we been at it, 30 years, maybe farm another 7-8 years. And we've kind of slowly focused more on greenhouse stuff because it's a little bit less taxing on the body. And Jane has started a really good online plant business, Northeast Pollinator Plants, and we keep doing, it's really, the pandemic has been kind of great for getting people interested in gardening again. So that whole end of the business has done well. And we kind of has focused on kind of back to originally what we started, which was growing vegetables. We got sidetracked with the animals. We did laying hens, which was a kind of a, before there was much organic eggs, and we had about 1,000 birds, and we lost a lot of money there. And then we tried pigs and lost money there, and said, okay, let's just get back to what we know how to do. So that's has helped, and we find ourselves now kind of probably the most enjoyable part for myself is seeing a lot of young people that work for us starting off on their own. So I think we have at least 20 people with their own farms now that have worked for us. So and that's what we kind of see ourselves doing in the next 7-8 years as we kind of go off into the sunset. So that's it for me.
Great. Thanks, David. That was great. Suzanne.
There. Hello, I'm Suzanne Long. Am I muted? No, I'm not muted. My husband and I run Luna Bleu Farm. We are now in South Royalton, Vermont, Central Vermont. We've been here since 93. Before that, we were in Stratford, Vermont, and before that, we were in Lebanon, New Hampshire. So for about 5 years, we felt sort of like nomadic farmers, you know, sort of uprooting ourselves and moving, and then uprooting ourselves and moving, because we leased land originally. And leasing land was actually great. You know, it enabled us to learn a lot without having that, you know, big financial burden of actually buying land. And we could focus on learning, and we could focus on, you know, getting enough money to buy a tractor and that kind of thing. Let's see. Right now we have about, our land is about 43 acres, pretty small. We've always been a diversified farm. So we've always had a rich diversity of crops, vegetable crops, but also we've always had cattle and chickens and pigs on and off, and sheep on and off. So we've always integrated the livestock into our whole operation. We came to organics sort of via biodynamics. That was sort of our first, really looking at these growing systems. And I think that gave us that whole farm as an ecosystem view. And I think just, looking at our farm as its own little ecosystem and how that fit into the natural ecosystem. I myself sort of came to organic farming. I was a biology and environmental studies major, and really was struck by, or just recognizing that of all of our basic needs, the way we grow food probably has the most detrimental effect on the environment. We could probably, of all the things we need to do, we need to eat. The way we feed ourselves probably has the greatest effect. So thinking about, what are the alternatives to our industrial agricultural system was really one of the driving forces for me. After college, I did some work in India, came back for a little while and worked at Rodale Research Center back in the 84, when Jeff Moyer was like the farm manager instead of being the CEO or whatever he is now. So he was the guy out there on the tractor managing all the big rotations. So I sort of got my a little bit of a deeper understanding of organic agriculture at Rodale, and then went back. I was back to India for a year and a half, looking at agricultural systems there, and people that were doing some organic farming and how that worked. How does that work in a tropical country? So that was, I learned a lot there. Returned and ended up getting a job in New Jersey at an organic tomato greenhouse. And so that was back in the late 80s. And that was sort of a crazy thing. It was really a rich guy's idea about how to make good money in farms by selling ripe tomatoes to the Philadelphia market, but he had no idea how to farm. So there I was supposed to be an assistant manager, and I had no idea. But luckily, there was a couple that came from Wisconsin that were the farm managers. And together we tried to save this struggling disaster of a tomato greenhouse. Dave, you would have, anyway, it was pretty horrible. But I was there for about, I don't know, I think 8 months, and it all went bankrupt. And so I fled New Jersey and came back up to Vermont. I do remember actually physically driving across the border into Vermont, and suddenly I could breathe again. I just felt so relieved to be back up here. And interestingly, when I came back up, I was trying to find out what was happening up here with organic farming, and called NOFA New Hampshire because I had more links on the New Hampshire side, and that's how I got to meet my husband, Tim Sanford, because he was on the NOFA New Hampshire board. But I was looking for jobs, and I actually went to Bruce and Joey and you probably don't remember this, Bruce, but I interviewed with you guys. I don't know if you didn't hire me or if I decided maybe to stay a little closer in the Upper Valley, and I ended up working with Jake Guest. And just another background. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm just like dropping names of people who've been in the organic movement for a while. But I actually, when I was in college, I lived at with the Wybrows, and Helen Wybrow has been involved with NOFA Vermont. So the Wybrows' little homestead was sort of a idealized view of farming for me, and that's sort of where I got some of my hands dirty and milked cows and did that kind of stuff. So some of my organic roots even go back to when I lived with Helen's family, on and off. But let me get back to where we are now. As I said, we're on about 40 acres, and we are a diversified farm. We're one of the first CSA farms we're one of the longest surviving CSA farms in Vermont. I think we in the Intervale are now the longest running CSA farm. So we, I think, started the year after the Intervale. And we still grow a rich diversity of vegetables. We've gotten into a lot more winter growing. So we do a lot of unheated high tunnels. So we have, and I think we were one of the first year-round CSA farms, first starting with keeping a lot of storage vegetables to provide to our community members all year long, and then expanding into the winter greenhouses. And we do farmers market. And so we've always been a very local marketplace. We are now, our daughter, Shona, is not interested in vegetables, but she's taking over the livestock part of our operation. So we too are sort of making a transfer for at least part of our operation. So she's taking our cattle and our pigs, and then she's added sheep back into the mix. And so we've been working with her, and that's been a great thing. Again, I think sort of like Eugenie said, it's smooth for the most part, and it's gotten better as we've moved farther into the transition. And she's not working for us, she's working for herself. So that's sort of where we're at now. I'm guessing we'll talk a little bit more about what organics was like back in the old days and some of those things that we experienced, maybe in some of the question and answer or just general. But I'll leave it at that, I guess.
Great. Thanks, Suzanne. Your story about the tomato operation reminds me of the joke of, the best way to make $1 million in farming is to start with 2. So I'm kind of impressed listening to everyone. Apparently nobody developed this amazing business plan and kind of followed the gold into farming. It's fairly remarkable. Somehow you had other ways to get into it. It's great. I think this leads to kind of a 2-part question that I just want to throw out there. And maybe I'll start with you, Suzanne, where you left off. I think, again, I'm trying to be mindful of the time here, but just to set the context a little bit. So if you have any comments about what was going on in the organic movement back when you started, Dave mentioned the whole LR and food safety thing from the late 80s. That to me was a pivotal moment. But if any of you have any kind of thoughts you want to share about that, how times might have been different then than they would be today for a new farmer, what were some of the things you were experiencing? And if you haven't touched on it yet, which some of you already have, but if there are other thoughts about kind of what drew you to the craft or drew you to organic farming. Let's use this opportunity to share that. So Suzanne, why don't you start?
Yeah, definitely. When I was in New Jersey, here I was working at this organic farm, even though it was a terrible example of an organic farm, but there I was in the Garden State, down in southern New Jersey, and I had to be really careful about what I said, and because everyone was like, "Oh, organic, everything's organic, isn't it? It's all carbon and oxygen. It's all organic, right?" And it's like, that was just sort of their way of putting down the idea of organic farming. We went to the American Fruit and Veggie conference down in New Jersey, in Atlantic City, back in the late 80s. I think it was just before maybe Alar was just starting, but Richard Meyer, who was the editor of the American Vegetable Grower magazine, was the keynote speaker. And so I was there with the two other organic farmers from Wisconsin we were sitting there in this big crowd, and he was like, "There is a conspiracy, and they're trying to take away our tools. I think meaning people who are worried about pesticides, they are trying to tell you that what you're doing is bad. We have to fight back." And the three of us were sort of sitting in the audience looking around, and we're like, there's no O on our head, right? No one knows that we are trying to farm organically, right? Because I don't know. I don't know what they would say. And so it was a big, just that divide between, conventional farmers feeling really threatened, and maybe the industry telling them that they were threatened. I don't know, but it was just a whole different time. And, organics at that time, especially if you were in other parts of the country, I think people were like, well, come on, what is this organic stuff? That's stupid. And, organic vegetables, it's all going to be full of worms. That's how we know it's organic, right? It's full of worms, and it's full of holes, and it's a mess. So the view of organics back then was just a whole different thing. There, that's it.
Great, thank you. Anybody else with thoughts they want to add? Bruce.
I think the two biggest things that I've seen is both the university side of it and the market side of it, because in mid-70s, when I was at UNH in plant science, even though I had some of the greatest, horticulturalists there, great plant breeders and great people, it was strictly unconventional agriculture, and they did not give us any backing at all, any support. And now they're like running soil, composting, divisions, so the movement has totally brought the university around from being totally saying that we cannot do it to us proving we can do it, and they coming around and mimicking what we've talked about organic matter and rotations, and principles of organic farming have become the principles now of the whole farming movement. And the second biggest thing, and the biggest thing that we saw, is the marketplace. In 1978, when NOFA got its first grants to start growers co-ops, both up here in Mont Northern and Merrimack Growers Co-op, we could not label our stuff as organic and really get into conventional places to sell our stuff. You had to label it as, there was no label for it. It wasn't until we created certification a little bit later in the later 70s and identified what organic was, and then there was a California organic compared to the New England organic, so it took some time for the marketplace to understand it. But it was the 60 Minutes Alar one, that really changed it, that put the marketplace to say, we want food that is clean, good, healthy food for our kids. And, and then with that, you have then the whole infrastructure of the USDA and people lending money and, equipment changing. But I think the universities and the marketplace has been the biggest change that I've seen in 45 years.
Well, I can jump
Yeah, Grace,
in.
then you, Jane. Yeah.
Huh? I don't want to jump the line here, but certainly the difference that it made to have a unified national organic program with USDA's seal of approval made it required for even those same recalcitrant guys from the 70s who were worried about us taking their tools away. They had to give out information about organic methods. The extension, the advent of that program made it required that farm service agencies had to make credit available for organic farmers. And organic farmers began to be counted. So the National Agricultural Statistics Service began to be able to actually count how many people were practicing certified organic farmers. There were downsides, to be sure, but the fact that that consumers in the mass marketplace could now be given an opportunity to buy things that followed the standards, whatever quibbles people had with the standards, opened up the markets for many small farmers who otherwise were not able to sell to their local markets as organic, even though we had a good program here in NOFA for many years, and we still have a good program that's now USDA accredited as Vermont Organic Farmers. But there was so much confusion and so much misinformation in the marketplace that people didn't know what to trust. So I think that the advent of federal organic standards has really had a beneficial effect on all of the small farmers, as well as bringing in the big guys who are definitely there, and to all of our benefit, because we need to convert those acres to organic as quickly as possible if we're going to survive. That's my spiel. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Eugenie, were you in?
Yeah, thank you, Grace, for saying that, because I think that's sort of, and what Grace and Bruce are describing, the infrastructure was starting to shift at a time when I think growers like us were beginning to see. So we were conventional strawberry growers. I'd gone to UVM. Dr. Boyce, fantastic strawberry man, said you cannot grow strawberries organically. You won't get the yields. And besides, there is no real market for it. So, like, why would you do that? It'll cost you more. You won't be able to get the money back. So why would you do that? But then our experience was that we were using some chemicals. We were using Captan, for example, which studies came out in Canada showing that it was a fungicide, showing that it was a carcinogen. And at that point, we had a young baby, and I was nursing this young baby. We then went on to have twins that I was nursing, and I lost complete interest in handling any of these chemicals. And thankfully, the organic sort of infrastructure and the whole picture of organic farming was changing at that time. And it enabled people like us to have a club to join, and which was really so wonderful. And things did begin to shift. If you look at the VBBGA, the Vegetable and Berry Growers Association, the meetings now are so vastly different. Before it would be like, well, I don't even know if people, like Jake and those guys, they didn't even bother going half the time, because, like, why would you go? Nobody was talking about organics. You were kind of it was all very established, larger vegetable growers in the state. You could sit at a table and nobody would tell you what variety of sweet corn they grew. You know, everything was like, it was a much different spirit. No cooperation, or little, or maybe I wasn't privy to it because I was going there as a woman. There weren't many women doing any of this stuff. Sam was too busy with the cows, so he couldn't go. So the whole spirit was just different. And then, you know, in came Enid, and kind of the big tent started to grow, and that was propped up by all the structural work of the organic movement.
Yeah, David. Thanks you, Janie.
Okay. It was interesting what Eugenie said about Captain, because I was talking with Bruce and said, remember, we couldn't even find seeds that weren't treated when we got started. It was just like, why is everything pink, you know? And now it's quite different. But interestingly, what Eugenie said about the conferences, I remember going to one. There were some university people that kind of, I think, helped start things. I remember hearing Winway talk about manure and doing all these things. It's like, wow, this is great. And then I was lucky to be at Cornell when there were some very old professors that had grown up on the farm before all the chemicals, and they would talk about rotations and cover crops and kind of on the side, but it was like, the knowledge was there. It was just kind of put aside for about 30 years. And now it's become the kind of the back to it. So it's not like we really reinvented anything. We're just kind of following what happened many, many years ago.
Yeah, great. Just back in the day when all agriculture was organic, way back when. You know, one of the things for me that I think several of you kind of hinted at was the idea that the focus for folks, I know for myself for sure, back in the 70s and early 80s was philosophical. We were driven by a philosophy, and the focus has shifted now to an economical focus, an economics focus. And you know, I don't know if we want to talk about why that was. I think I've got my theories, but when things did change from kind of being philosophically driven to being economically driven, it did seem to change things, at least in my worldview. I want to move on a little bit here to talk about some of the challenges you all have faced. Again, several of you have already brought some up, but specifically, as you were beginning your career in your path here, you obviously faced a lot of challenges. Folks today are facing challenges as they get into it. The challenges may be different for people today than they were then. So I'm interested in getting your perspectives on things like land access, sense of community, market opportunities, support services, things like that, some of which you've already touched on. But if you have new thoughts or new ideas or things you haven't shared yet, this would be a good time to bring that up. And why don't I jump to Bruce? If you want to kick it off, Bruce?
Well, I think one of the biggest changes in land access has always been a barrier to people without money. I mean, land just comes with this price that is connected to housing and other developmental pressures instead of raising food. So even when I bought my first 40 acres in 1978 for $20,000, 5 acres of pretty good land, the rest of it woodland, there's a lot of money to go into mortgage for. And when I bought this farm, I had to go into debt, a lot of money for it. So the price of land being tied to other things and not tied to food has always been a problem and always will be a problem. I've always heard, ever since I was looking for land the first time in the 70s, was that, well, the older people own the land. It's just you have to wait until they pass on. And I think we're in a situation now that even all of us older people own the land, and we're looking for the right place to pass it on to. And, making that connection with the next generation, find people. The difference is now we've had organic land for 30, 40 years, and we want it to keep organic. I may have sold my development rights to always be a farm, my farm, but I want to have an easement on it that there'll never be Captain back on this farm, again. So it's having good land that has been poisoned, land that has been stewarded, that has a good organic matter, that has all those pieces of it. I think one of the biggest problems that we found, though, back in the 70s, I think what David hit really well, is that we still had old timers who had some of the tools and some of the knowledge that we were able to work with and be able to get some of those. Now we're the elders that need to pass on this knowledge and these tools to the next generation with. Part of it, and the tooling of it, was here in New England, there was always a rich market gardening sort of community. And so some of the cultivators, some of the things that we got old pubs, we had old seas, all through the 70s and 80s and into the 90s, we had to go find tools, make tools, weld tools, create all that infrastructure ourselves. And now young people can go buy new Gs, Alice Chalmers Gs. They can buy new budding cultivators. Those things that when Robert Hurrier brought the first set, him and Lowell Reinheimer brought the first set of stuff from Michigan back to New England back in the late 70s. It was like, wow, look at all these tools that we can then use because weeding is our biggest problem. Once you get over the 2-3 acre market garden size, weeds are your issue. And a lot of that stuff was not available to us. We had to make it ourselves, go find it someplace else. And now at least people starting out go and look and see these really good tools that we've helped develop and helped make available to people. And that way we've kicked the ball down a little bit. And the biggest thing that I personally had was funding problems. Nobody would lend you money to be an organic vegetable grower in the 70s and 80s. And now you could probably get, funding for a lot of these things. So I think we've made it easier. Maybe it's because of what Grace said about having a certification that's out there, uniform. You have a marketplace for it. Which is the cart, which is the horse? I don't know, but they've developed together hand in hand as we've developed as growers in 40 years.
That's awesome. Great. Thanks, Bruce. You covered a lot of ground. Sam, I see you're ready to speak up.
Thank you. Thank you, Will. Yeah, I just wanted to, there has been a huge change in the whole farmland access world. And we got our first farm by trying to deal with the cattle dealer had one side of the farm and the old farmer had the house side. And it took a day and a half at closing to settle the old hay debts and the cow that the farmer didn't get paid for. Since then, there's been a lot of work in Vermont, and Darby Bradley and the Vermont Land Trust are definitely. He was a visionary, and then we have Gus Seelig at the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and certainly Senator Leahy has always been working with the state in terms of funding. We were able to do an early project on our farm, which enabled us to pay off our mortgage. We did a dual goals project where we sold a conservation easement on the farmland and created a 10-lot development. 12 lots, that 4 of which are affordable housing, and 2 of which have Habitat for Humanity homes on them. And today there are just many more organizations that are working both for affordable housing and for conserving farmland. So I think later on in the conference, you're going to hear about the agri-commons, which is another option as opposed to the going the conservation easement route, although that's part of it. It's just, it does amaze me how many government programs are available now. Hoop House money is available for organic farmers. That was really the first government federal money through NRCS that was available for organic farmers. And now you can get all sorts of EQIP money and other programs. State-wise, Will, I think you were one of the ones who first started working on the Working Lands Initiative. You also worked on the Sustainable Jobs Fund and the Farm to Plate investment program, which just came out with a new strategic plan that's going to hopefully encourage people to buy more local food. I do think one other thing in our talk here that I wanted to emphasize is I think one of the differences that, and this is going from somebody who going from conventional to organic, the whole organic movement was set up as a cooperative movement, and Bruce, you and Robert and Deep Root and others, it really was a group effort. And although in dairying we had co-ops, as you can see from what's happened to Agrimark and Cabot and others, it hasn't been a very cooperative business. And Louis Longo, who was the president of Agrimark when we were first shipping milk, had a book called The Pursuit of Profit. And that was really about taking control of the whole New England market, which he tried to do, but unfortunately it almost bankrupted the whole system. And so the whole idea of organic going from food co-ops to farmers markets to all of this, which required us all to work together. I hope and think that that's something we've all dedicated our lives to.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I see Grace lined up. Before you start, Grace, I'm looking at the time here, and it's 1:15, which means we have less than 15 minutes. I was afraid the time would fly like this. So so keep the answers short, and I'm going to move to a lightning round when you're done.
Okay. Well, first of all, to the question of becoming more economic oriented versus philosophy oriented, I don't think that there's really a contradiction. I think that the philosophy of economics in this country has to change, and access to land is one of the primary places where it has to change. And you might notice that all of us on this panel are white, and that's also a legacy of the fact that brown people and BIPOC people have been excluded from land ownership for generations now, and beginning to do something about that. So land sharing and work with people like the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust and the Everytown Project are critical to really beginning to address this. You know, I won't go into any more about that than the one little quip that I have in the book about the early NOFA farmers markets. And honestly, a lot of people who had access to land back then were trust funders and people who had family money that they could invest. But then people started needing to sell their products, and one of the quotes that I have is, people discovered that they couldn't make any money growing vegetables. They had to sell them. So that's my comeback here. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Grace. Yeah, we're getting some nice questions from folks. Again, I'm worried we're going to run out of time. Well, when do we ever have enough time? I'm going to ask about work-life balance. This is something that people who have experienced things can provide perspective on that folks who haven't maybe experienced certain things could learn from. So, you know, how briefly, anybody who wants to take this, one question is, how did you handle the work-life balance, or did it just stay unbalanced all the time? Those of you who have children, how did that go? And maybe embedded in that question is just kind of a piece of advice you might have. One truth, one simple, words of wisdom for folks you'd like to share based on that work-life balance piece that we're all trying to negotiate here. So who wants to kick that one off? I see you, Janie, then Suzanne.
Yeah, okay, so the women will take this one. My advice to people, and I will say that I'm a little disappointed that more of the young farmers, especially the women farmers, don't ask for advice because I'm hoping that they're not feeling alone out there, that there really are, there are people who have done this before. My biggest piece of advice is to ask for help. And I think that, within the dairy community, in some ways, although it was enormously sexist at the time, there was kind of a sense of the importance of sort of family life within that. And so that the women farmers on their own, the women farm wives, shall I say, did kind of bond together. I think that that's happening also now, but I think that I also see, and maybe partly because of the pandemic and because of lack of access to child care, it is very, very difficult. And I definitely made use of local babysitters, just constantly. There was no other way. A farm, although it's a wonderful place to raise kids, is a workplace. And a workplace is not always a safe place for children. Not every activity loans itself to doing it with your kids. And I envision a time when there would be more, we didn't have family around. Hopefully our kids who are nearby get more help from us than we got from our parents. But I think that just asking for help.
I guess I would say similar thing. I don't think we ever found a balance. It's hard. And I think, raising being a mom, raising kids is probably one of the hardest jobs. And farming is one of the hardest jobs in terms of being 24/7. So I think I guess my advice is don't be too hard on yourself and don't be afraid to ask for help. And don't compare yourself to others. It's easy to think, oh my God, I'm not doing anything right. But you're probably just doing it as good a job as you can, and just don't be too hard on yourself. And like Eugenie says, ask for help and reach out and see if you can build some of those things to help other families share some of that burden. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Suzanne. Anyone else? Yeah, David.
Probably the one thing that we did is we decided to stop doing a farmer's market, which really allowed us to be with our kids a whole lot more. It was, while they would participate in it, it became kind of just overbearing. Really, it was like 2 days of market preparation and then the market, and you're exhausted, and that really helped us. That was one thing that we did. So I think kind of really looking at your marketing things and trying to, your kids are only young for once, for a certain period of time, and you can easily miss it. And I remember my daughter saying, yeah, you guys, I don't want to farm, you guys are just working all the time. And I think that was one of the comments that convinced us, like, yeah, we got to cut back a little bit and prioritize. So.
Great, thanks, David. Yeah, Grace or Bruce, any pearls of wisdom to add?
I don't think I had a balance when I was young. I think all through my 20s, 30s, and 40s. It came when I was in my 50s and 60s. After the farm got paid off, after my kids grew up, and after I realized that I kind of blew it, that I wasn't there for them enough during, May, June, July, August, September. They got me for 5, 6 months during the winter every single day. And so my balance was always seasonal to them.
Well, for the 8 years or so that I was a market gardener, it was only the last couple that we had a child, and then when the marriage broke up, there was no possibility that I could continue being a farmer, part-time, full-time, or anytime. Just growing our own garden was enough, was all I could handle. So yeah, the balance of work and life, whether you're farming or not, is still a difficult balancing act, especially in our culture and our political system and our capitalist society, which does not value the kind of caregiving work and that kind of household work. So it's a bigger question than just for farmers. It's a question for everybody.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So I guess this probably, unfortunately, is going to be my last question. Thanks to all the attendees for sending their questions in. I've tried to get a couple in. This is one of them too. And it relates to something you've already been speaking to a little bit, but it's, what advice do you have for members of the organic community? I'll give you a choice. What advice do you have? What do you see as the future of organics? And or what is your wish for organics in Vermont and or beyond going forward? And it's we have well, anyway, so I'll let NOFA cut us off if you guys go past 4:30. How's that? Yeah, you're Janie. Sorry, go ahead and jump in.
Okay. I guess just quickly, I think the dangers to us, so I can point out the challenge. I'm not sure I have the advice to solve it, but I think one of the dangers is to get too divided in our own new ideas of how to do what we're doing better. Ecological, regenerative. I mean, we have joined the Real Organic program as well, and I very much support that. But I do worry about, and some of this does come from sort of marketing necessities, I guess. I just think we have to, at all points, look at what our goals are, is to take care of the soil, produce the healthiest food that is going to produce the widest number of healthy human beings and other organisms in the world. It's a huge goal, and so we can't afford to be divided. There's already too many forces out there trying to divide us. Kind of within that, I would say another huge challenge is to do things that are really not a good idea, but because we can't afford not to in terms of money. And I have to say that one of them is the use and overuse of plastics. I mean, we got into this, we all know how we got into this, but the amount of agricultural plastic produced and used by organic farmers is staggering. And somehow that, and I think there are other things within there, but somehow we need to be united in taking care of this earth, or else, our children, the future generations, won't be having these kinds of conversations.
Thanks, Eugenie. Grace, you're up next.
Yeah, well, I thank you, Eugenie, because you basically started out with my big theme, which is unity, and the cost of infighting, and the mentality of, it's either or, us versus them, and that kind of thinking is what we're really trying to provide an alternative to. And we need to stop looking at people who we disagree with as the enemy. And we need to really, really look towards the possibilities that organic, whatever level of organic you're at, and there's certainly a spectrum, from even the most philosophically committed aren't always pure, and even the big guys who are really looking for profit may have extremely good intentions and plenty of money to carry them out. So it isn't an either or situation, and we have to stop fighting each other, because there's still plenty of hugely powerful forces arrayed to try to bring us down and to try to squash. We're still just 5% of the food system in terms of money. But we're noticed, and we're a threat to business as usual. And my final aphorism is, we've used the market in a very good way to educate the public. Vast majority of the public now knows that organic is a better idea, and they wish they could afford it if they can't. But by looking at the market as the whole answer, we get into a lot of trouble. And we have to be politically active. Some of the problems of organic in the industry, and so consolidation and all of the bad things that we associate with industry, are a result of political activity and political power. So we need to be cautious about that, but we can't do it by raising the standards. The standards are not the right tool for changing that system. What I always say is, you can't dismantle capitalism with a marketing plan.
Thank you, Grace. Bruce, David, or Suzanne, final thoughts? Yeah, David.
So future of organics, I guess I'm really optimistic in terms of maybe not so much organics, but successful young farmers, in seeing. I mean, I'm kind of a stuck in the mud old marketing person. I think of selling it to a store, but seeing CSAs take off way back when, it's like, I would have never thought. And the creativity that I see coming out of younger farmers is always kind of blows me away. And they're digitally savvy, they know how to work in this world. And so I'm pretty optimistic in terms of that. And I think the pandemic has made a huge difference in making the general population aware that food is medicine and that food is important for us. And I think it's gonna stick, just like the local food movement really made a difference. I think the pandemic and the thought of food being important for your health is now on the general consciousness, and I think it's so I'm pretty optimistic, and at least regionally, I think New England is well set up for successful organic operations.
All right, great, thank you. Bruce. Oh, you're mute.
I agree with everything I just heard. I think the one thing I'd like to say to the young growers today is to just go plant seeds, not to be afraid of it, it's really what Mother Earth wants us to do. We want to add compost. We want to add seeds. We want to nurture plants. We want to grow good food. We want to feed ourselves. And they just have faith. So many young people are so afraid sometimes to jump into it. And that, oh, I can't do it. I can't do it. You can do it. Nature wants to grow food here. You want to work hard on it. Just go for it. Don't be afraid. When we started, it was a lot harder. And it's so much more accepted now. And food makes for good people. People realize that.
And whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. Suzanne.
I'll just say, similarly, I have a lot of hope in the future generation. And I do think, I think people are really realizing the soil is so important. And I think especially as we see that potentially stewarding the soil could potentially be our salvation in a bigger sense than just producing food and being an organic farmer. It's a much bigger issue. And I think people are starting to realize that. So getting into stewarding the land and making the soil health the focal point, I think is really exciting. It's easy to get away from that, trying to keep surviving, but if we can hold on to that soil health part, that's really the key. So that's where I'd like to stop.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne. And thank you, everyone. This has been awesome. Obviously, it went too short. I feel like we barely scratched the surface of some of the things that kind of we'd wanted to talk about, we'd hoped to talk about. Thanks to NOFA for hosting this. And I'm not sure what to do next, except Grace or Livy. Do we turn it back to you or sign off? Just want to thank you.
Thanks so much, Will. Yes, that was wonderful. It was so inspiring and interesting to hear all of your thoughts from all of you. Thank you for taking the time. And it was really encouraging, and felt really inspiring to end on that uplifting message that there's a lot of hope from you all in the future, and in the folks who are farming now and entering farming now, and just where we can go. So I would encourage anyone who's on the chat to reach out. If you have more thoughts to continue the conversation, please reach out to Libby at NOFA-VT.org. Tune in next week, 1 week from now. Here are some pictures playing while we're talking, some of these highlights of snaps that the panelists shared with us. Really wonderful. Next week, next Sunday afternoon, we're going to be hearing from a panel of future scouts, folks, emerging leaders in Vermont agriculture. Some of them are working directly in farming, and some are in other roles in the food system. And we're going to have a really exciting conversation about where we imagine and hope that the next 50 years will go, that builds off of what we've heard today. So I invite you to join us 1 week from today. And I hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you all so much. Again, to our fabulous panelists, and to Will, our wonderful facilitator, and for all of your work, these many, many decades of leadership and helping make what we have today possible. And it is truly on the shoulders of our elders and those who've been doing this work a lot longer that we're all learning about where we might go. So thank you so much. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and rest of your week.